Most people imagine the end of life as a simple dimming of the lights, a calm and inevitable shutdown. But what few realize is that in those final moments, something extraordinary can occur. Many seniors report silent, intense experiences that are difficult to explain. Some see scenes from childhood, hear voices of deceased family members, and even feel like they're leaving their own bodies. These perceptions aren't just ordinary hallucinations, but profoundly real manifestations for those who experience them. Dolores Cannon, a researcher dedicated for decades to studying consciousness, revealed that in these moments, the mind opens to realities beyond common logic. What she discovered could completely change our understanding of the end of life. These revelations make us reflect, not with fear, but with a newfound curiosity. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about now, with respect, clarity, and attention to the details that matter. Have you ever stopped to wonder what one sees in the last seconds of life? When the body prepares to depart, what does the mind access? For many seniors, this instant brings a kind of reunion, not with living people, but with cherished presences who have already passed on. There are consistent accounts of familiar voices, an environment filled with peace, and a soft light. According to Dolores Cannon, this isn't an illusion. It's part of a natural transition process, a bridge between what we call life and what we don't yet fully understand. Science tries to explain it with electrical discharges or chemical reactions, but the experience goes beyond that. Those who've gone through it, even for seconds, never forget it. If you've made it this far, take a moment to like and subscribe. This is a space carefully created to shed light on topics we often avoid, but which are part of everyone's life. Dolores Cannon's investigations began with regressive hypnosis, a simple technique used to treat anxieties and fears. But over the years, her patients began to report something unusual. During these trances, many described memories of other lives, contacts with subtle dimensions, and, most importantly, the exact moment they left their physical bodies. The frequency and similarity of these accounts were striking. Seniors who had never met each other told almost identical experiences about the final seconds before death. It was as if a curtain was being drawn back, revealing a scenario that most people are unaware of. Warm lights, welcoming voices, and an indescribable feeling of lightness emerged in these stories. Dolores didn't dismiss these accounts as delusions. She noted, analyzed, and cross-referenced data until she realized that there was a very consistent and revealing pattern there. One of the most recurring elements in the accounts analyzed by Dolores Cannon was the appearance of familiar figures. Mothers, fathers, grandparents, even beloved pets appeared to greet the senior in that borderline moment. In many cases, the person said they saw these figures smiling, waving, or extending their hands, even while unconscious in the eyes of medicine. There's something very powerful about this type of description. It's not just a memory. It's as if the mind is accessing a layer of reality that has always been there, but which only reveals itself when the physical senses fade away. Dolores began to understand that death isn't an abrupt end, but a subtle continuation. The accounts pointed to a kind of conscious passage where the senior doesn't feel alone, but supported by presences they recognize and deeply love. In interviews and books, Dolores emphasized that these phenomena aren't exclusive to those who believe in life after death. Many of those who reported these visions didn't follow any religion, nor were they involved in any spiritual practices. And yet they saw, heard, and felt something. This makes us think about the existence of a broader consciousness that doesn't depend on belief to manifest. The brain may slow down, but consciousness seems to remain active, lucid, and connected to something greater. For seniors, this experience can be a silent blessing, a relief, a meaningful farewell. Dolores said that, in the final moments, fear tends to dissolve because what emerges is familiar, welcoming, and profoundly real, something that completely transforms the way we view the end of life. There are also accounts of a kind of review of one's own life journey. It's not an external judgment, but an internal clarity that arises in the final moments. Dolores Cannon observed that many seniors described scenes from childhood, memorable moments, and even small details forgotten over time. This kind of review doesn't happen with words, but in flashes. as if the mind is replaying everything quickly and accurately. It's as if the senior is receiving, at that moment, a greater understanding of who they were, what they lived, and what they left behind. There's no regret, just a serene acceptance. For many, this experience becomes the most important moment of their life, as it brings a meaning that was previously hidden. And this meaning, once revealed, seems to prepare the soul to move on in peace. This final life review, according to Dolores Cannon, isn't accompanied by pain or guilt. On the contrary, it's often described as a kind of inner embrace, a reconciliation with everything that has been lived. The senior doesn't feel shame or anger. They simply observe, understand, and let go. It's a silent and, at the same time, deeply transformative process. Dolores believed that this instant represents the point at which the soul frees itself from the weights it has carried for decades. It's as if consciousness sees more clearly what previously seemed confusing or difficult. This final vision may not last more than a few seconds, but it's enough to change the quality of what is felt. Many seniors enter this state without even knowing what's happening. And when they return from such an experience, even momentarily, they report a peace they had never experienced before. In rarer cases, Dolores Cannon recorded accounts in which the senior seemed to pass through a different space. It wasn't just about seeing images or faces. Some described portals, corridors of light, sensations of floating, and an intense feeling of lightness. Some said they heard sounds they couldn't describe with words, like distant music playing directly in their hearts. Although it may seem strange to many, this type of experience has been reported in detail by various people over the years. Dolores treated each case with seriousness, without trying to fit them into pre-established beliefs or simplistic explanations. She said that, in these moments, the soul may be detaching from the body in a more conscious way. And this process, far from being frightening, revealed itself as a smooth transition, often accompanied by a serene, silent, and welcoming joy. For family members accompanying the senior at this time, the changes may seem imperceptible: a distant gaze, a slight smile, a calmer breath. But internally, a true reunion of the soul with its essence may be taking place. Dolores Cannon affirmed that the physical surroundings may seem the same, but what happens in consciousness is profound. The passage between life and what lies beyond isn't abrupt. It occurs in layers with delicacy. The senior may no longer be able to speak, but internally they feel, understand, and connect. Many families only realize the dimension of this when, after death, they feel an unexpected peace. It's as if the senior themselves, upon departing, leaves a silent message in the environment that everything is all right. Dolores said that this energy of serenity is one of the greatest gifts that a conscious farewell can leave behind. Another important point in Dolores' investigations was realizing that, even before death, many seniors already showed signs of contact with this subtle reality. Small phrases said casually, mentions of deceased loved ones, vivid dreams, or the feeling that they were being prepared for something. These manifestations weren't seen as delirium, but as indications that consciousness was already aligning with the next stage. It's as if the soul, with its own wisdom, knew that the earthly journey was coming to an end. Dolores observed that the more serene the senior became, the stronger the presence of this connection. They didn't talk about death with fear, but with a kind of peaceful acceptance, not as someone giving up, but as someone understanding that there is something greater waiting. And this understanding changed everything about the way they lived their final days. Dolores Cannon insisted that we shouldn't treat these experiences with disbelief or cold skepticism. It's not about imposing beliefs, but about listening attentively. Seniors who have gone through this weren't trying to convince anyone. They simply reported what they felt with simplicity and truth. And the most surprising thing is that these accounts were accompanied by a change in their gaze, speech, and even their gestures. It was as if something inside them had expanded. The fear of death, which had accompanied them for so long, gave way to a kind of wisdom that can't be learned in books. Dolores saw this as a sign that the soul is always in motion, even when the body begins to stop. For her, what we call the end is, in fact, the beginning of another journey. A stage that can be welcomed with serenity. if we know how to listen to and respect what these moments reveal. That's why, when we look at a senior in their final days, we need to go beyond appearances. The fragility of the body can hide a soul in a profound process of transition. Dolores Cannon taught us that there is a silent dignity in this instant, a kind of beauty that isn't in the words, but in the presence. When the senior closes their eyes for a few seconds and seems to smile to themselves, they may be seeing something that we can't see. They may be hearing voices they recognize, smelling scents that marked their history, rediscovering affections they thought were lost. All of this happens in a space that escapes logic, but that is absolutely real for those who experience it. And that's precisely where the value of these revelations lies. They help us understand that dying isn't disappearing. It's just continuing in a different way, in another landscape of existence. Many healthcare professionals who have accompanied seniors in their final moments have also reported curious episodes. There are cases where the patient, even unconscious, smiles, moves their lips as if conversing with someone invisible, or extends their hands into empty space. These gestures were long interpreted as involuntary reactions, but Dolores Cannon's observations suggest another possibility. She believed that the soul, as it gradually detaches from the body, still tries to communicate with the visible world, but it already has one foot in another reality, a reality where time isn't counted in hours and where consciousness seems to flow with lightness. These manifestations, when viewed with respect, take on new meaning. They aren't signs of weakness, but perhaps the first steps of a new form of existence. Something that deserves to be observed not with astonishment, but with silence and reverence. Another discovery made by Dolores was the similarity between near-death experiences and the accounts of seniors about to pass on. In both cases, descriptions emerge of intense light, a sensation of floating, absence of pain, and encounters with loved ones. These elements, repeated for decades across various cultures, show that there's a pattern. Dolores didn't seek to impose explanations, but to highlight that something real is behind these experiences. The senior who approaches death seems to enter a broader field of perception. It's as if consciousness expands its vision beyond the limits of the body. And in this space, life gains a new perspective. Fears lose strength, regrets dissolve, and the meaning of what was lived appears with more clarity. Dolores saw in this a gift that life offers before departure. A final look at everything, with lightness, understanding, and peace. There's a curious point that appears in several accounts collected by Dolores. Many seniors said that, shortly before departing, they had an intense feeling of reunion, not just with people, but with themselves. It was as if they were accessing a part of their essence that had been forgotten for a long time, a feeling of belonging, of finally being where they were supposed to be. This sensation was described as familiar, safe, as if they were returning home. There was no fear, just a silent recognition. Dolores believed that this reunion with the deep self is one of the most important experiences of life, and that it only happens when all external distractions fade away. When the body falls silent, the soul can finally speak, and what it says at that moment doesn't come with words, but with a clarity that touches deeply, a clarity that liberates and reconciles. Some families have reported changes in the environment during the final moments, a different silence, a sudden fragrance, a calm that seemed to touch everything around. Even without understanding, many said they felt that something sacred had happened. Dolores Cannon encouraged these accounts to be taken seriously, not as proof of something supernatural, but as part of a subtle reality that has always been present, only ignored. When someone departs consciously, they seem to leave a trail of peace, something that isn't seen but that is felt, and those nearby perceive it. This perception, even discreet, can transform grief. It brings a different understanding about death and a silent gratitude for having accompanied that moment. Dolores said that this conscious farewell is a gift for those who leave, but also for those who stay. An invitation to presence, to listening, and to acceptance of life in all its phases. In many ancient cultures, death was seen as a sacred crossing. There were rituals, chants, prayers, all done to prepare the soul. Dolores Cannon believed that something of this still lives within us, even if in a forgotten way. The way we deal with seniors and with death says a lot about how connected we are with this ancestral knowledge. When we welcome this moment with respect and calm, something changes. Not only for those who leave, but for everyone around. Dolores said that by respecting this transition, we give the senior a chance to depart with dignity, and we give ourselves the chance to learn from what they reveal, because each conscious farewell is also a lesson about life, a wordless lesson passed from soul to soul. And perhaps that's why so many who witnessed these moments never forgot them. They felt that something important had been shown, even if they couldn't explain it. Gradually, we come to understand that death isn't the opposite of life, but part of it. Dolores Cannon dedicated decades to listening to, noting down, and sharing these experiences, not to convince, but to invite reflection. What she discovered, through so many interviews, sessions, and accounts, is that the end of life can also be a beginning, not of a new existence in the religious sense, but of a new way of understanding what we are. When we listen to what a senior has to say in their final days, we're receiving something precious, a synthesis of decades of life, filtered by a gaze already free from the pressures of the world. Dolores saw in this a portal, and she believed that by crossing it we don't lose someone. We gain a deeper understanding about our own existence, and that's why these revelations shouldn't be forgotten. They are seeds of consciousness that can still blossom. Dolores Cannon never claimed to have all the answers. Her work wasn't to build certainties, but to open paths. By carefully listening to the accounts of seniors in their final moments, she realized that there's a silent knowledge that sprouts when words are no longer enough. Many of these accounts converged on the idea of continuity. Not a physical continuation, but a permanence of consciousness in another state. This type of perception profoundly changes the way we deal with aging. We begin to see the senior not as someone at the end of the line, but as a being in transition, someone who is accessing knowledge that escapes common understanding, and, by opening ourselves to this, we also begin to review our own beliefs about life, time, and what really matters at the end of the journey. It's common for those who have gone through such experiences to become calmer, more attentive, more silent. Dolores said that this behavior is the result of a kind of wisdom that arises when the soul has already begun to detach itself from the pressures of the world. The senior becomes more introspective, but not out of sadness. They are often in another rhythm. A slower rhythm, yes, but also a deeper one. Listening to a senior in this state is like reading a rare book, full of pages underlined by life itself. Each gesture, each look, each pause has something to say. Dolores invites us to respect this time, not to rush or distract, because it's in this space between the words that the revelations happen, not as ready-made phrases, but as understandings that touch directly on what is most human in us. And it's by listening like this that we approach the essence of the other. Death, when lived with awareness, can become an act of beauty. Dolores Cannon observed that seniors who had time and space for this transition departed more peacefully. It was as if life, upon recognizing this moment, softened everything. Breathing became lighter, eyes sparkled for moments, the environment around became calmer. It's not easy to talk about this, but it's necessary, because all of us one day will be facing this moment, and the more we know about it, the less fear we will have. Dolores said that information liberates, and that knowledge about death can help us live better. It's not about looking for formulas, but about allowing ourselves to listen to those who have already been there, at that boundary. It's with these voices that we learn about presence, acceptance, and the value of each moment we still have. Even those who don't believe in anything beyond what the eyes see can benefit from these reflections, because the experiences reported by so many seniors, analyzed seriously by Dolores, speak less about belief and more about humanity. It's about listening without judging, about observing without the need to explain everything. Science may not prove all these phenomena, but what it can't do is ignore the positive impact that this type of listening has on the lives of those who are departing. When a senior is listened to attentively, they don't feel invisible, they feel like a part of something. And perhaps that's the greatest legacy of the spiritual revelations that Dolores Cannon left. The invitation to see the end of life with more open, less hurried, more present eyes. An invitation to loving listening, to connection, and to deep respect for those who are ending their cycle. For many, these ideas still sound distant. But just being close to someone in their final days is enough to realize that there is indeed something different happening. Dolores Cannon simply showed us what many already knew in silence, that life doesn't end abruptly, it transforms. And this process can be beautiful when lived with awareness, care, and presence. Her mission was to give a voice to those who never had the space to share these experiences. And today, it's up to us to carry on this listening. Each story told, each farewell lived with respect, becomes part of this great collective learning. Because the end of a senior's life can actually be the beginning of a new wisdom for all who remain. We just have to be attentive. We just have to be open to learning from silence, from gestures, and from everything that isn't taught in books. If you've made it this far, take a moment to reflect. Think about someone you love, someone who has already passed on or is passing on. Remember that listening attentively can be a gift, both for those who speak and for those who listen. The experience that Dolores Cannon shared isn't to be feared, but understood. And the more we understand, the more prepared we are to live with presence and gratitude. If this content touched something in you, consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear these words. And if you want to follow more reflections like this, subscribe to the channel. Here we talk respectfully about what many avoid, but that is part of everyone's life. May this message remain with you, not as an end, but as a beginning. Because understanding death is also a deeper way of understanding life.